The show. Bob, welcome.
Good evening, Lou. How are you?
I'm doing good. And yourself?
Well, for an old codger, I'm doing all right. Thank you. I'm going to be turning 74 next week, so all things considered, I've given up complaining.
God bless you. Look good for your age. Now, explain to everybody exactly what your connection is to Roswell.
Well, I had no personal first-hand involvement with Roswell, Lou.
Mm-hmm.
I've done some research on it. Over the years, I've been involved in this whole thing for about 40 years now.
Okay.
And I never really got involved. I didn't intend to get involved in this damn thing. I got into it through the back door, so to speak. I was a professional soldier for most of my adult life. And altogether, I put in 27 years in active duty in the Army. But I never got involved with UFOs at all until I was assigned to SHAPE headquarters in 1963. When I got over there, that was in Paris, France at the time. I learned of a study that was underway that had been initiated in 1961. And this study was published while I was still there in 1964. I had a cosmic top-secret clearance. I worked in the war room. I worked in what they call the operations center. And I had a chance to look at the document, study the document, and literally what I learned from that time changed my life. And that's how I got involved with UFOs.
Now, it changed your life?
Well, I read this document they published in '64, Lou, and I had access to it because of my clearance. There were only 15 copies of it ever made.
Right.
And it was a 3-year study that SHAPE NATO did to try to determine what the hell was going on in the skies over Central Europe. Back in those years, many of your listeners may not even be aware that we and the Soviets were facing each other across a divided Europe, armed to the teeth, and World War III was only, a gesture away.
Mm-hmm.
And these strange unknowns were flying all over Central Europe in those days, and I'm told they're still flying all over Europe. And these things were large circular metallic objects. And they were flying at a very high altitude, at a very high rate of speed. And they were flying, obviously, under intelligent control. And the Soviets, for a long time, thought they belonged to us, and we for some time, thought they might be Soviet. So, when it was all over with, we learned, as did they, that these didn't belong to either one of us. The Soviets were as interested in it as we were. And this study, initiated in '61 and completed and published in '64, literally changed my view of the world, because they concluded after this 3-year study that UFOs were not only real, but they were very likely extraterrestrial, and that they involved at least 4 different races, and that they represented technology so far advanced for anything that we or the Soviets had in those days and even now, that we knew that they weren't manufactured anywhere on planet Earth. And when I read that report, it was classified, placed in the vault. I used to pull it out of the vault every chance I got and read it for the last, I was there from '63 to '67. When it was published in '64, I had a chance to read it, and for the first time in my life, I realized that UFOs were not only real, but they represented probably, in my opinion, even today, as the greatest story in human history.
Now, out of curiosity, how can you publicly state that you read this document? I mean,
well, I had a cosmic top-secret clearance, Lou.
Okay.
I had to have that to work in the war room.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the operations division. And one morning about 3 o'clock, I was on shift in there. You've probably seen photographs of in the movies and such of these war rooms. The ones today are a hell of a lot more sophisticated and modern than what we had back in those days. We had maps on the wall. We had telephones, teletypes, that sort of thing. We manned the thing around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I was on a shift one morning about 2 in the morning. And the controller, who was an Air Force colonel, looked at me and he says, "You seem to be bored." And I says, "No, I'm not bored. I'm just tired." And he says, "Here, read this. This will wake you up." And he took the damn thing out of the vault and threw it on my desk, and there it was. It was titled An Assessment. And it had a subtitle, titled it, An Evaluation of a Possible Military Threat to Allied Forces in Europe. And it was a conclusion of a 3-year study. And having the cosmic clearance and having access to it, I was able to read it. And Lou, when I read it, it changed my view of the whole world.
Kind of like a wake-up call to reality.
It was indeed. And, the conclusions of the 3-year study were simple. It was a military study. It had one purpose and one purpose only. And that literally was to determine whether there was a threat to Allied forces in Europe. These objects were very unusual, very high, very fast, and obvious in formation and under intelligent control. And Gordon Cooper even later testified that when he was a pilot over there in those days, he used to see them while he was up, flying around in F-100 jets. And Gordon reached the same conclusion. Now, whether he read the report, I don't know. Maybe he did. Anyhow, the question is, who are these guys? What the hell are they doing here? And what's their agenda? Well, the study concluded after 3 years that they were real, that they had apparently been here a long time, and that they apparently represented at least 4 different intelligences, because we had actually seen some of the occupants on the ground. These damn things would land, Lou. They would land at airfields. Guys would get out. They played games with us. They were always playing games with our radar. They were making fools out of us. They were flying circles around our top jets. And on and on and on and on. And when the study was relatively thorough, actually. And it concluded that they weren't from here. They'd been around quite a long time, apparently. The conclusions were that historically they'd been around for hundreds of years, maybe even longer. They concluded that they apparently had an agenda of some kind, although back in those days we didn't know what it was. They concluded also, which was one of the most interesting things, that apparently they were not hostile or malevolent. They were not a threat, because the continued demonstration of their incredible technology made it very clear to everybody that if they were hostile or malevolent, the game would have been over a long time ago.
Well, just out of curiosity, having said that, what in your research that you have done throughout the years, has that kind of changed with people being abducted and being probed, or cattle mutilations or what have you? I mean, has that changed your views at all?
No, not really. No, I've spent 40 years, Lou, trying to make sense of it. That SHAPE NATO study was only the opening door for me. Mm-hmm. That's really what got me on my research program. After that, I could never put it aside. I could never turn my back on it or lay it down. I had to know more. I had to know as much as I could. And for the remainder of my years in the service, even the 14 years that I worked with FEMA after I retired, I still had a military clearance, and I kept digging into this thing from every aspect. I used to drive some of my old friends up the wall. I'd visit them in their offices, go through their files. And I wanted to know what it was all about. And after 40 years, I have got a begrudging kind of opinion of what I think's really happening.
And what do you think's happening?
Well, I think we've been under what I would like to call an intimate interrelationship, Lou, with advanced technology from other places. For many, many years, we thought they were simply extraterrestrial, other planets from other star systems. Over the years, the knowledge that was learned and the research that was developed has indicated that some of them were very likely from other dimensions. And they have technology that makes us look like, headhunters in the New Guinea jungle, literally.
Good way of putting it.
Well, when you stop to think about comparison, I remember as a kid, my grandmother used to say, if we could only see ourselves as others see us. And I've kind of put that little theory to